In this lesson, I'm going to show you super practical ways that you can use extended chords like major 7, minor 7, augmented and diminished 7th, and so much more. You will leave this video with super actionable tips that you can apply in your playing. So I'm really excited about that. And just before getting started, if you like juicy chord voicings, go download my chord dictionary guide. It's the first link in the description box below. I added add 9, add 11, super cluster chord voicings, many kinds of chord progressions and different styles that you can try. It's super valuable. So once again, you can get it first link in the description box below. So without further ado, here's how to play every extended chord musically on guitar. I'm going to show you 7 ways that you can use major 7 chords musically on guitar or in your music. None of the tips I'm going to share with you today are jazz oriented. You can do so much more than jazz with major 7 chords. So I'm going to start by showing you chord shapes in case you don't know how to play major 7 chords. I'm going to play them all from G major 7. One of the most popular shapes are like this. Right? So with that shape, what I do is that I mute the 5th string so that we don't hear it. So how I do that is when I fret the note on the 6th string, I leave my index finger in the way of the 5th string such as I can mute it. So in that case, I can even strum the chord if I want. Another popular shape is from the 5th string like this. It's like if I were playing a G bar chord from the 5th string, but we just take the doubled root note, which is on the 3rd string, we bring it 1 fret down to reach the major 7 interval, and we've got a G major 7. You could, instead of starting from the index, you could start from the pinky instead and play the chord on the left side, the version on the left side like this. So you've got a version on the left side or on the right side. And in both cases, you could bar your index finger and play the notes on the 1st string too. Or you also have the version from the 4th string, which goes like this. So it's the same shape as a bar chord from the 5th string, but it works from the 4th. And it makes a major 7 chord because of the little gap from the 2nd and the 3rd string. Right? When you want to tune your guitar without a tuner, usually you're going to play the 5th fret and an open string. But the only exception is the 4th fret between the 2nd and 3rd string. And that exception makes it that the same shape is going to make a major 7 chord from the 4th string. And you could even do the left side version on this one too. It's like a little pyramid, like 5, 4, 3, 2. I really like this one. It's really comfortable. So you've got all of these shapes that you could use to play major 7 chords. Everywhere on the fretboard. So at number 1 is to use the major 7 chord on the 1 or the 4 chord in a major key. So the root chord or the 4 chord. So in any major key, you have the major scale, which has 7 notes, but you could harmonize that scale with full chords instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. We could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So usually the 1 chord is C major. For example, we are in the key of C major. And the 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, is a F major. But you could decide to transform these 2 chords in major 7 versions. So it's already a really cool progression just to vamp with the 1st chord, major 7 and 4. And then you can start adding other chords of the key. I could play C major 7, A minor, which is my 6th chord, and then F major 7. That worked well in that case because my A minor 7 shares many notes with my F major 7. So you can experiment by playing major 7 chords on the 1 or the 4 chord in any major key. The second tip is to use them in a minor key, but this time on the 3rd and 6th chord in a minor key. I'm gonna call them the flat 3 and the flat 6 chords, because if I play this time in C minor, my C minor natural scale is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6. So that's why I want to build the chord from the flat 3 and the flat 6. So in that case, that's going to be E flat in the key of C minor, which I can play as a E flat major 7. And then that's going to be on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, which is going to be A flat, and I can play A flat major 7. So once again, so that works really well in minor keys. The third tip is actually to mix those chords of parallel keys and use all the ones that I've showed you in the first 2 tips. What does that mean to use the chords in parallel keys? It's really simple. You have the key of C major, and its parallel key is C minor. So you start from the same note, but it's just minor or major, right? So I could decide to use the 1 and 4 chords, major 7, which were C major 7 and F major 7, and I could decide to use the flat 3 and flat 6 from my C minor key, which are E flat major 7 and A flat, and kind of play back and forth and mix those 2 keys together. That could sound like this. There's a great modal sound, great colors on top of that. So I use that shape on C major 7, then A flat major 7, and then the F one, it's like the pyramid, but since we have an open string on the first, I can refret it like this, it's even easier. And then from E flat. So what's really cool once you do that is that you can start making melodies and improvising by just shifting your C major scale and your C natural minor scale on top of the chord that belongs to that key, right? So on top of the C major 7, I can play my C major scale, same for the F major 7, and on top of the E flat major 7 and A flat major 7, I can play my C natural minor scale. So it's gonna sound super, super cool. I have a little loop and I'm gonna demonstrate how that sounds. And then improvise. It's super cool if you like that sound. There's so much more interest and colors in the music that you're playing. If you have a looper, just loop these 4 major 7 chords and practice shifting from your C major and C minor scales and listen to the change of sound and the change of mode on top of these. I love doing that. Then the 4th tip on how to use major 7 chords musically is to use it after an unextended root chord. That means that if I stay in the key of C major, I could play a plain C major chord, and then I would transform that chord into a C major 7. just to add more passing color before we go to a different chord. And most of the times when we do that, the melody is gonna highlight that change because both chords are exactly the same. The only thing that changes is that little movement in the middle of reaching the major seventh interval. So I did a lesson on the Beatles recently on the channel, and the song Something does exactly the same thing. Something in the way she moves. So it's exactly the same thing on the vocals. It highlights the root of the chord. Something, and then that new interval in the chord, she moves. So this is a really, really nice move to do with your melody or your vocals. Same thing, recently I did a video on Steven Wilson, the song Drive Home. He plays an A major chord. Drive home, drive home. Same thing, highlighting the major 7 interval in the vocals, right? So that's like that shape right here, the shape that I showed you here. But since it's an open format, you can play it with an open A string, right? So that's something that you can do. The fifth way is to use it with more extensions. You don't have to use major 7. You could use major 9, major 13, like 11. You can add more extensions to the chords. And the best example for me is, I don't know if you are a fan of The Legend of Zelda, but the game Ocarina of Time, the opening theme, when you just like open the game on your Nintendo 64, what you hear is I love this music, right? So it's in the key of C major. You have the 4 chord as a major 7 chord, and the root chord, the 1 chord, as a major 7 chord too. So that works, right? In a major key, you play them on the 1 and the 4 chord. But then they played chord like this. And that is going to be an F major 7 add 13, or an F major 13. So what we did is that we play the F major 7 like this, like I showed you, right? But then what we can do is to wrap the thumb around and play the low F for a bigger sound, right? And instead of playing the 5th of the chord right here, we're gonna change it for the 6th, which is also a 13. Super colorful chord, right? And then the same goes here. This is a shape that I haven't showed you, but it's another possible shape for major 7 chords. You got this shape. This is used a little bit less frequently because there's like a big dissonance at the top of the chord, but it's another version. So to have a smoother sound, they just brought the note right here, which is the C note. It's the same as the bass note, 2 frets higher to reach the 9th. Right? And that creates a C major 9. So you've got this. So you can add extensions to make the chord even sweeter. The only rule is that the note that you're adding needs to be in the key, right? So by adding this note, it's in the key of C major. Same goes for this one. Actually, it's the same note both times, right? It just creates a different extension. So it's really, really nice. The 6th way is to use it as an expressive chord substitution. To use let's say a 4 chord progression, take one of those chords and substitute it with a major 7 chord. The best example is the song Time by Hans Zimmer on the movie Inception. So it's probably in the key of A minor. So we've got A minor, and then E minor, but the second time, instead of repeating the same chord progression, same 4-chord progression, he's going to change the E minor for a C major 7. So it's going to do the second time. And it has such a profound impact, the chord change here. So the goal is that the top notes of the E minor are the same ones as the C major 7. So we hear the notes that we expect to hear. It's just the chord behind it that's different. Instead of the E minor, it's C major 7, right? So, and it's the same principle right here. We were playing the F by wrapping the thumb around. But you can do it with the little pyramid shape with the thumb around for a bigger sound with that chord, right? And then the 7th way to use the major 7 chord musically is to use it on the Neapolitan chord. The Neapolitan chord is just the chord that's placed on the flat 2nd. So on any key, you just play the root chord. For example, if I am in the key of C minor, I just go 1 fret above, and then I build my major 7 shape. So in that case, that's going to be a D flat major 7. And then there's a nice tension and resolution with the root chord, right? So I'm going to give you an example with one of my songs that I made a few years ago on the channel. The chord progression is C minor, A flat, G minor, and then that Neapolitan chord with the major 7, which resolves here. So it works really well to end the chord progression and go back to my root chord, because if you think about it, the major 7 interval on that Neapolitan chord is already the root note of my key, right? It's just like tension, resolution. So it acts as a different kind of tension and resolution that we most often get with the 5 chord. But you could do, to me, that's the same amount of attraction of tension and resolution. I'm going to share with you 6 ways that you can use minor 7 chords musically in your own music. And like I do usually in this video series, I start by showing you some chord shapes that you can use. So the most popular one for minor 7 is this one. This is by far the most useful. If you want other voicings from the 5th string, you could play this one. It's similar, but we drop the 5th of the chord. Or you could play it like this with a bar. A bit harder to play, so definitely this one is the most practical. From the 6th string, you could play this one. Some people also like to play it as a full bar, right? It's like a C minor bar chord, but you lift a pinky. Like this. And there's also what I call the Pink Floyd minor 7 voicing, which is this one. Right? Because of... Right? It's the typical Pink Floyd voicing. From the 4th string, you could play it like this. Some people like to bar it. I find it really not comfortable, so I play it like this. Or you could use the Pink Floyd voicing and drop the bottom 2 notes and use only that. So I think you have plenty of voicings to try if you want to follow this lesson. So the first way that we can use minor 7 chords musically is simply to use it on the 1, 4, and 5 chords in a minor key, right? So let's say I'm in the key of G minor. and I play a G minor, natural minor scale, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Then on the first note, the fourth and the fifth, I'm gonna build a minor 7 chord. Right? So it's super musical, and of course you don't need to use all three of them in the same order. It's just you can use any of them in a minor key. And in a major key, that's the 2, the 3, and the 6 chords, right? So if I am in the key of C major, then on the second note, that's going to be D minor 7. On the third note, that's going to be E minor 7. And on the 6, which is A, right? So I could have a progression like this. So thus far, it's pretty basic. It's just diatonic in the same key. So we're going to progressively go with nicer and cooler tips as we go along, right? So the tip number 2 is to use the 2 chord as a minor 7 chord in a minor key for a Dorian sound. So usually the 2 chord in a major key is naturally a minor 7 chord, but it is not in a minor key, right? So let's say I'm in the key of G minor. So that is my root chord. The 2 chord is supposed to be a minor 7 flat 5, or what people call a half-diminished. But if I use it as a minor 7 chord, it's gonna give me a Dorian sound like this. So many artists are gonna use it, the version where you just bar, right? You use the bar, and you could use it from other chords, right? I could do. So it's a nice modal sound. Use it on the 2 chord in a minor key. Tip number 3 is to use a rootless voicing for deeper extension. So if I use, for example, an A minor 7 chord, and I remove the bass note, which leaves me with, then that chord can be so many different things. If I add, instead of an A at the bottom, I add a C, it's just a regular C major chord. And if I add an A, it becomes a minor 7 chord, A minor 7. And we can keep going, right? The logic is that we are in the key of C major or A minor, and we go 2 notes down the scale. So C, B, A. And we can keep going A, G, F. Woo! That sounds spicy, but it's kind of very hard to play. So instead of playing the F here, we could play it here. I love this chord. Let's keep going. F, E, D. Also a very practical chord to use. I made a video very recently about Steely Dan chords, and this one is very, very frequent in their music. And we could keep going. Not very good, this one, so I could use a B flat instead. Oh, that's nice. And then, so I have lots of options here. So what I could do is just to use that rootless chord and add many different kinds of bass notes to form different chords. Really nice to use it. Then the 4th tip is to bridge the gap between the closest 2 chords in a key that are minor 7 chords, right? So in the key of C major 7, the 2 chord is minor 7, and the 3 chord as well. So what many artists are going to do is kind of play a chromatic chromatic descending line of minor 7 chords in that spot right here. So it gives us something like this. And you can do that also in a minor key. So instead of between the 2 and the 3 chord, it's going to be between the 4 and the 5 chord, right? So if I am the key of A minor, then the 4 is here and the 5 is here, right? So something like... Really nice. The 5th tip is a really nice chromatic descending lines with major 7 and minor 7 chords one after another. The 5th tip is to use major 7s and minor 7s one after another. So you can just use a minor 7 chord anywhere you want. Let's say I use it here on G minor 7. What I'm going to do is that the top note of this chord, I don't play it as a full bar, so the top note is on the 2nd string. I'm going to keep it, and that's going to become the top note of a major 7 chord, 1 semitone lower, like this. Right? So I play G minor 7, and then G flat major 7. And then I can keep going 1 fret down, I play a minor 7 chord, and 1 fret down, a major 7 chord. So it does something like this. And then you can go on and up, down the fretboard as much as you want. This is a chord progression that I analyzed a lot in Steven Wilson's music. So you can click on the upper card to catch the lesson where I analyzed one of his albums and found that chord progression here. I find it really cool. So what I love to do with this is to create little arpeggios that go in that same direction with that same chord progression. Let me share with you this little exercise right here. So I start, for example, from a major 7 chord. Then I go 1 fret down and I play a minor 7 arpeggio. And then I keep the same common note and I transform this into a major 7 arpeggio, the same one. And then 1 fret down and minor 7 arpeggio. Right, so one after another, it's a really nice cycle full of colors and like modal sounds. And so on, right? So it's a really cool exercise. I hope you're gonna try it. The 6th tip is to use the minor 7 chord for funky embellishments. So you can take a chord like this, and then lift all of your fingers and keep only the bar, and then add them in with a hammer-on. It makes you think probably about the classic Long Train Running by the Doobie Brothers. And then you can use other shapes like this one. You can always do... And you can add your pinky on the spot where it is the note of the Pink Floyd voicing. And then in the song, they even use the 6th. So just have fun with this voicing, with the funky embellishments. I'm going to demystify diminished chords for you. I'm going to show you many useful chord shapes, how to build them, and how to use them musically in your own chord progressions. So I find that most videos on diminished chords for guitar players on YouTube are going too fast. They're like, you have this shape and this shape and this shape, and you know what a diminished chord is, so let's dive right into the tips. And I'm like, whoa! slower please. So if you felt like this is gonna be the best video for you because I'm gonna take my time to explain. So first of all, let's start at the beginning. How do we build a diminished chord? So let's start by picking any note we want. Let's say this one. That's an E on the 7th fret of the 5th string. And the way diminished chords are built is that we're going to start from a note and stack other notes that are always 3 semitones higher than the previous one. So 3 semitones, on and on. So I have a pretty quick trick for that. You start here, like I said, and then you're going to lay your fingers flat on the fretboard on the same string. So all my fingers are 1 fret apart on the 5th string. So on my index, it's going to be my starting note, and on my pinky, this is the note that I'm going to stack because it's 3 semitones higher. 1, 2, 3, 3 frets higher. So the note on my pinky right now is a G, so I know that I'm going to stack E and a G, right? And then you do that from all new starting points. From the G, I'm doing the same thing. 1, 2, 3. The note on my pinky is a B flat, so I'm going to stack E, G, and B flat. And that does my diminished chord on a 3-note structure. But we don't have to stop there. We can keep going. So from the B flat, once again, 1, 2, 3. The new note on my pinky is a D flat. So now I have E, G, B flat, and D flat. So that is my full 4-note structure diminished chord. And if I want to go further, it doesn't work, and let's see why. If I want to keep going and keep stacking, so from my D flat, if I do that, 1, 2, 3, the note that I have right now on my pinky is an E, but I already have an E. It's my starting note. So it means that a diminished chord can never have more than 4 different notes, because if you keep going, you just create duplicates of the same notes. So you have a 3-note structure, diminished chord, and a 4-note structure. But now it's not really practical, right? It's not even playable. So let's see some more practical chord shapes. And it's really counterintuitive, but the 4-note structure, diminished chord, is actually easier to play and more practical than the 3rd note structure, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. So here are some popular chord shapes. This one from the 6th string. So you start with your middle finger on the 8th fret of the 6th string. Then you bar the 7th fret with your index from strings 4 to 2, and you add your ring on the 8th fret of the 3rd string. And you kind of have to mute the rest. And obviously you can play that wherever you want. It doesn't have to be from the 8th fret, but I just decided to start from here. So that is the shape from the 6th string. Then one of my favorite shapes from the 5th string is this one, right? So starting from the 5th string, we have the middle on the 8th fret, we have the ring on the 9th fret, the index on the 7th fret, and the pinky on the 9th. That's one of the most comfortable positions for me. And starting from the 4th fret, we have 4th string, we have this shape right here. Also very practical. So starting from the 4th, index is on the 8th fret, a ring on the 9th, middle on the 8th, and pinky on the 9th. So those are the 3 most used shapes. And now let's explain why a 3-note structure diminished chord is not easier to play. I recommend playing it in a smaller voicing if you want to play only 3 notes. Like this, because if you want to make the chord thicker, let's say, you have to add more notes, but you have to add duplicates of the same notes, octaves of the same notes, and most of the times it creates shapes that are stretchier and not so practical to play. And in this case, the role of a diminished chord is to add more tension. So why would you play a 3-note structure like this when you can get more tension from a shape like this, right? If you compare the sound of both, this one has more tension, right? So I'd rather use these shapes. then 3 note structured shapes. So now let's see how we can use the diminished chords musically in our chord progressions. I have 3 ways that I love to do it. The first way is to use it in between chords that are placed a tone apart. So let's say that I have a chord progression in the key of D major. So I would have D major, E minor, A, and B minor. Right? So in the key of D major, that's the root chord, the 2 chord, the 5 chord, and the 6 chord. So since D and E minor are a tone apart, they are 2 frets apart, I can slap a diminished chord in between them. And the same goes for A and B minor. They are 1 tone apart, 2 frets apart, so I can slap a diminished chord in between them. It adds a nice spice, a nice tension in between them. So I start from D, then I choose the note, the bass note that's in between the root note of both of my chords, and from there I build my shape of my diminished chord. So the shape from the 5th string, remember, is like this, and then I can land on my E minor, so it goes like this. Sounds sweet, and the same goes for the A and the B. I'm gonna pick up the note in between them, and I'm gonna create my shape of my diminished chord, this time from the 6th string, so that is this shape. And then I can play. Nice. So if I play the whole progression with the diminished chords added, it sounds like this. Sweet, so I like to use it this way. The second way that I like to use diminished chords is to travel up and down the fretboard smoother. Because if you look at this diminished chord right now, I said that we build it by stacking intervals that are always a 3 semitone higher each time. So it means that if I go 3 frets higher with the same chord, it stays the same chord. Right? This is the kind of sound that we hear in the like silent movies and black and white, where like there's a lady tied on the track train and you hear like to build tension, and then the major chord after, right? So it's used to build tension, but now it's the same chord when we jump 3 frets higher or 3 frets down on the fretboard. If I analyze the notes of this chord, we've got an E flat, we've got an A C, and a G flat. If I go 3 frets higher, I get G flat, C, E flat, and A. Exactly the same notes, but in a different order. So in fact, this is the same chord, right? So it means that if I have a chord progression where I have to jump a lot, let's say I have D followed by G. But let's say that I want to play my G chord, instead of playing here, I want to play it from the 10th fret here. That's quite a big jump, right? Right? So what I can do is to bridge the gap with a diminished chord. I could start from D, play my diminished chord just 1 fret higher, and then travel 3 frets higher until I am closest to the chord where I want to land. And then I can resolve on this, and it sounds super cool. So something like... And now you bridge the gap between your chords that were distant in here. So that's something that I love to do with diminished chords too. And the third way that I love to use it is to modulate with the use of the diminished chord, to change keys. Because if you're thinking about it, if the diminished chord is the same 3 frets higher each time, it means that we only truly have 3 diminished chords existing. This one, and this one. Because as soon as we go 3 frets higher, it's repeating the same. It's just an inversion of the same. So since we have so few diminished chords, it means that we have so many different landing spots or resolutions, and we can use that to change keys or to modulate, right? So let's say I pick this shape right here. The rule of thumb is that you can pick any note in that chord, go 1 fret higher, so let's say I pick the note on the 4th string, go 1 fret higher, and then from that place you can build a chord. So that note is an A, so I can build an A major chord. And that becomes a good resolution for my diminished chord. And you can do that for all notes in the chord. So if I focus on the note on the 3rd string, 1 fret higher is E flat, so I could resolve on an E flat chord. And it's still as satisfying as the first option. If I focus on the 2nd string, if I go 1 fret higher, that's an F sharp, so I could resolve on an F sharp major. And if I focus on the 1st string, 1 fret higher is C, so I could resolve on C major. So you see, all of these resolutions are satisfying and acceptable. So we have 4 different places where we could go with the same diminished chord. And that's not even true, because we could have 8 places to go, because we can land on minor chords too. So from this place, I could play A minor instead. I could land on E flat minor. I could land on F sharp minor. Or I could land on C minor. Like this one. So you have 8 different places where you can go as landing spots after playing a diminished chord, and you can use that to your advantage to change keys if you want. And you don't even have to change keys. You just gotta make sure that the diminished chords that you're using is going to resolve well on the chord where you want to land. So for example, if I come back to my example of using D and E minor after that, and that I put a diminished chord in between, let's say that I want to resolve back to D. I could just transform my E minor chord into an E diminished and then ask myself, is it going to resolve well on D? Yes, because the note on my 3rd string, here, C sharp, 1 fret higher, is a D. It means that it's going to resolve well on a D. So in my case, I could have a chord progression of D, E flat diminished, E minor, and E diminished, and that would sound super good with 2 diminished chords in the same 4 chord progression. It resolves really well on the D chord here, so many possibilities with that principle here. So to use it in between chords that are a tone apart, to bridge the gap between distant chords on your fretboard, and to modulate to a lot of different keys and different options. So a question that I get a lot is, where does the diminished chord come from? I understand that the 3-note structure of the diminished chord comes from the regular harmonization of a major scale, right? You probably know that each key has 7 chords and that they are all pretty much major or minor chords. So if I am in the key of C, they are all major or minor chords, but the 7th chord is a diminished chord, right? So we understand that, right? That we can stack triads, and that the 7th one is a diminished one. But what we don't understand is that if we keep stacking to get a 4-note structure, we don't get a diminished chord. We get... And this note is not a diminished note. It's supposed to be... So what we have here is a minor 7 flat 5, or what people call a half-diminished structure. So if we harmonize the same key but with 4-note structures, we get C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, and we get B half diminished, so minor 7 flat 5. So where does the fully diminished chord comes from? Where does it come from if it's not included in a regular harmonization like this? There are two possible options here. It could come from harmonizing a harmonic minor scale. A harmonic minor scale goes like this. So you have 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, natural 7, 1. So if we stack our thirds with the harmonic minor, we do get the fully diminished chord with all the right notes. So we could say that when we use a diminished chord is that we are borrowing the 7th chord of the harmonization of a harmonic minor scale or key or mode if you prefer, right? So that could come from harmonic minor, but also it could come from a dominant 7 chord. So if you look at a this shape right here, that's a diminished chord, right? If I remove my pinky and we just look at the shape of this, it reminds me of a dominant 7 chord. Right, it's very similar. That's the flat 7, the 3rd, and the 5th of a G dominant 7. And when we add the pinky on top, we are adding a flat 9 to add more tension. So we are so used to hear dominant 7 chords and 5 chords. It's been around for hundreds of years in the music that we're listening to, that when we hear that, a diminished chord like this, our ears want to latch onto it like it's a dominant chord, like it's an altered chord in a sense, right? So that's why it's so satisfying to hear this resolution to a root, because we perceive it more as a dominant chord without a root, right? It's just a flat 7, 3, 5, and flat 9 of this chord, and we perceive it more like this than as a standalone diminished chord. So that's the two possible explanations. It comes from harmonic minor, or it's an altered chord without the root. So you probably know that in any major or minor key, you get 7 chords, right? The root chord, the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the infamous 7 chord, which is a diminished chord. And if we play it with an extended 7th, it becomes a half-diminished chord or a minor 7 flat 5. And most guitar teachers are going to tell you to avoid this chord because it's the different chord, right? All the other chords are either major or minor chords. You see them more often in pop music and the first songs you learn on guitar. So they tell you, we're going to push this chord aside for now. And while it might be great advice for true beginners not to confuse them, the problem is that many people never come back to learning the half-diminished chord, and it's actually a secret weapon. You can do so many musical things with it on the fretboard. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you 5 different ways you can use the half-diminished chord musically on guitar. So just before starting, I'm just going to show you a few shapes that you can play if you don't know how to play it on the fretboard. So the first one is like this. So usually a minor 7 chord is played like this, but we want to lower the 5th of the chord for a flat 5 to get our minor 7 flat 5 chord, so that's played like this. So that's the shape from the 6th string. The shape from the 5th string is going to be like this. That's a really comfortable one that I like. So the regular minor 7 is like this. And we have to lower the 5th of the chord, which is on our ring right here. So we have to play it 1 fret down, and it does that voicing right here. And another useful shape from the 4th string this time is this one. So it's a really useful 2-finger, really easy to play. You just need to bar with your middle finger. Maybe it's not common for you, so maybe you have to practice it. But with those 3 chord shapes, I'm sure that anywhere you are on the fretboard, one of those 3 is going to be closest to where you are so that you don't have to jump too much. So this one, and this one. So the 5 ways to use the half-diminished chord musically, some of them are going to sound jazzier, but you can use them in other ways than jazz. And I'm using them really frequently in my ambient guitar music, so you'll see it's not only for jazz. Number 1 way to use the half-diminished is to play it before the flat 6 chord in a minor key. It sounds beautiful. So if I am in the key of C minor, the flat 6 chord is gonna be A from A flat right here, and we're gonna play a major 7 structure right here. So in my C minor scale, the 6th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is A flat. That's why we start on A flat. And we have to build a major 7 shape just to make sure that we stay in the key, right? And what we're going to do from that chord, we're going to keep the rest on top, but we're going to change the bass note from A flat to A natural, so 1 fret higher, and we get our shape of the half diminished. And that's a nice color because we have so many notes in common between this and this that it's just a really nice passing chord to use. So I could play the root chord, let's say C minor 7, and then our half diminished on A natural, then A flat major 7, and we can finish with G dominant, for example. So it does. And maybe it sounded jazzy a little bit right now, but there's a way to use it that it doesn't sound jazzy. My favorite way is to use it in the key of E minor. And I have a super easy shape. So actually the little minor 7 flat 5 shape, we're gonna play it on C sharp with lots of open strings like these. So your ring finger on the 4th fret of the 5th string, and then your index on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and all the rest open on the strings 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to replace the ring by the middle on fret 3, and now that's going to become a C major 7. And you can alternate between both like these: C sharp, minor 7 flat 5, C major 7. And then E minor, right? This is something that I'm using in my own ambient guitar music. For example, listen to that clip of my song Lonely Under the Empty Sea from my album Chord. So you see, you can use it in ambient music too, so I love using it before the flat 6 chord. The second way is to use it with a chromatic walking bass line, and that's the spirit behind Stairway to Heaven, right? The principle right here, the spirit, is to go from A minor and eventually land on, you recognize that shape right here, so that would be an F sharp half diminished right here. So we want to come from here to go here after it. The only thing that changes is the little top note. the spirit stays here, right here. So you can notice that if we remove the bass note and we keep only the upper 3 notes right here, it's actually an A minor triad. It's like an A minor bar chord. But we remove the big power chord at the bottom, and we are left with this. So if we add an A, we just complete the A minor chord. But if we add an F sharp, we're just creating a half diminished chord. And even more, if we put an F natural, now we got the same flat 6 chord from the first tip right here, right? The major 7 chord. So that's a really useful chord because depending on the bass note that you choose at the bottom, you can create many different things. And it creates great sounds, and you can take that to your advantage, and that's what's so clever about Stairway to Heaven right here. Tip number 3 is one of my favorites, is to use the half diminished to replace or substitute a minor plagal cadence. What does all that gibberish mean? Theory, jargon? I'm gonna tell you what this is. You've probably already heard that sound before. That's what we call a minor plagal cadence. It's when we play a 4 chord and we make it minor to attract the root chord. That's this emotional, cheesy little resolution that we all love, right? So a regular, authentic cadence is to play the 5 chord that resolves to 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. A plagal cadence is to come from the 4 chord and resolve to the 1. So we have the note in common that makes it a smoother resolution, and then many artists are transforming this chord into a minor one to resolve after. And we can actually use the half diminished to substitute that same movement. So instead of playing F and F minor that goes to C, the root chord, I could play the 2 chord, so D minor 7, and then make it a minor 7 flat 5, so half diminished, and then resolve to C. And it's kind of the same effect. Right, because we have the same movement inside the voicing. We have the da, 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 da. We get the same one, so it's a nice substitute. It's a different color. It's even more effective to me because you've got another note that wants to resolve at the bottom, right? So it's a great way to substitute it that I use in some of my songs from time to time. The last 2 tips are more on the jazzy side, but it's still great to know. So tip number 4 is just a good old regular 2-5-1. That's the most common turnaround in jazz. If you play jazz, it's gonna be your bread and butter chords to use. So for example, if I stay in the key of C minor, that's gonna be D minor 7 flat 5, then G dominant 7, and then going to C minor 7. So it's just 2, 5, 1. And if you want to spice it up, you can actually use exactly the same thing in a major key. So you could target a C major 7 at the end. So now your half diminished chord is going to be slightly off key, like it's not in the key of C major, but that's going to work just as well. So it's great to know the 2-5-1. And the 5th tip is to use it as a dominant 9 chord without its root. So it's a rootless dominant 9 chord. And I'm going to explain why. Let's say we're going to pick that shape once again right here. So we could consider that all the notes in this chord right here are just extension of another chord. It's like a G chord without the G at the bottom, right? If I add the G right here, I get a I get a G dominant 9 chord. So even if we don't play the G, it sounds like it's implied a little bit, right? So we can resolve to C after, which is the root chord of my key. And that sounds great because what is implied is 5, 1, and that works super great. So knowing that, we can use that dominant 9 voicing in many different ways. Now I used it as the primary dominant of my key, 5, 1, to the real root, but I could use it as a secondary dominant. So let's say that I want to play the root chord, C major 7, and then I want to play the 4 chord, F major 7. So from the 1 to the 4 to the 1. But let's say I want to add more tension to lead to the 4 chord. I could actually play the half-diminished chord just from 1 fret below, 1 half step below. So I'm going to play my shape of a half-diminished. And then that's going to resolve super well to my F major 7. Because of the same principle at play that we kind of hear implied that it's a C dominant 9, which is the 5 chord of the F, right? It's the perfect resolution to go to the F, but F is not my root chord, it's my 4 chord. So it's a dominant, a secondary dominant, if you will, and then I can play the real dominant to my real root, right? So something like, and it just attracts the chords really, really well. I could use it as a tritone sub also. So if I take this right here, we could imply that there's a G at the bottom, but we could also change it. If you don't know what a tritone sub is, it's just that we're gonna keep the same thing on top, but we're gonna change the bass note, G in our case, to its tritone. So the tritone right here is gonna be D flat, and that's gonna create a super altered D flat dominant chord. And it's gonna work just as well, just as the G chord to attract the C. It's gonna work to play the tritone substitution, the D flat, to attract the C after, right? So it's a great resolution after it. So there you go. Those are 5 ways. I'm sure I could have found many other ways to use it. It's a secret weapon. You can use it in so many ways. It doesn't have to sound jazz. Like I said, my favorite ways is to use it before the flat 6 chord to add a little color passing tone, or to substitute a minor plagal cadence. And I'm even using that into my own ambient guitar music. Hey my friend, in this lesson I'm going to show you how to play this mysterious and weird sounding chord that we call the minor major 7 chord, because when you're thinking about it, there are only 4 combinations of thirds and sevenths that we can have in the same chord. You can have the major third with the major 7th, which creates a major 7 chord. We can have a minor third and a minor 7th, which we call a minor 7 chord. We can have a major third and a minor 7, which creates a dominant 7 chord. And those 3 chords are really, really common in all the songs you're hearing. But there is a forgotten 4th one, which is the minor third with a major 7th, which we call the minor major 7 chord. And when you're hearing a chord like this, most often you don't know what to do with it because it's very dissonant and you don't know how you could write songs with it. So in this video, I'm gonna give you many examples and ideas on how to use that infamous minor major 7 chord. So let's start by just looking at a few chord shapes that you can play if you don't know any of them. So the first one I was playing was this one. I'm gonna do it on C minor every time. So it's like playing a C major 7, but we have to lower the top note on the second string 1 fret down, and it does. That voicing right here, I prefer to play that one instead. So the fifth of the chord, which is here, I just put it 1 octave higher, so it changes nothing to the chord functionally, but it's just more comfortable and more balanced to me. So either like this or like this. If we keep the same shape here and we slide it up to the 11th and we play the C as the root note on the 4th string here on the 10th fret, you have another voicing like this. Another that I like from the 6th string is like this. Right? So it's better if you use finger picking when playing a voicing like this to be able to easily avoid the 5th string and the 1st. I mean, you could play the 1st if you want, but it's just gonna be more dissonant because of the interval right here from the 4th to the 1st string. So I prefer to play it with 4 strings. So like this. Yeah. So you have many different voicings. Of course, we could like invert those voicings like this, but the goal of this lesson is to inspire you on how to use it. If you want to explore more inversions of it, you can go forward and do it. So how can we play it musically? First of all, we could play it with the harmonic minor scale. If we analyze all the notes of our minor major 7 chord, we have the root, the minor 3rd, the perfect 5th, and the major 7. And there is one minor scale that has all of these notes, and it's the harmonic minor scale. So that means that this chord right here could be considered a root chord of a song in harmonic minor. So you could just vamp that chord, or like I do, like I like to play big effects like this with a volume pedal. And then you could create a melody or improvise with your C harmonic minor scale, like. So it's really cool. It's a kind of ambience that we don't think about using very often. It could make something different to the songs you're usually making. And if you've seen my video on augmented chords, I'm going to put it in the upper cards if you haven't seen it, you see the similarity between a chord like this, right? And the shapes I'm showing you in that video. So if I take the same notes up top, but I play the root note here on the 5th fret of the 4th string, we have an augmented chord. And if I add the C at the bottom, it now creates the minor major 7 chord. So those chords are closely related. So you could in fact play a C minor major 7 chord. And then the 3rd chord in your harmonization, that would be from E flat like this, you could play an E flat augmented. And that would be awfully close, right? If I change the E flat to a C, we get the same shape, right? So you could play C minor major 7 and E flat augmented and add like little, I don't know. I have a little loop that I have made, and you will see that it sounds even better to improvise in harmonic minor with that. have a lot of fun with this concept to play the minor major 7 chord and augmented chords in harmonic minor. The second way to use it is really classic and cheesy in a way. It's to end the song. You use the minor major 7 chord at the end of your song to add a mysterious note. That is something that is being done in James Bond and the Pink Panther and many theme songs, especially if you want to do detective music or something like this. So usually they're going to add a ninth in the voicing. So a really classic voicing is like this. So since it's in E minor, you could open the 6th string. So in many versions of the James Bond theme, that's what it's going to end with. Same thing with the Pink Panther, right? If you are a fan of Pixar, like my girlfriend, the movie Monsters, Inc. ends with a chord like this also. So it's a really nice way if you want to make detective music. This is the chord that you have to end with. It's just a mysterious touch at the end. You could use the minor major 7 chord as a suspension, like you don't stay on it, but you just resolve on its same minor chord. That's something that J.S. Bach used to do, something like a... Right? So you just play the minor major 7 chord, and then you resolve the dissonant major 7 to the root. And that's something that you could do in your songs, like just start from that little dissonance that we call a suspension or an appoggiatura, and start your little theme like this. I don't know. So it's a really nice way to use it. Another way is to use it as a passing chord, and this is something that's been used a lot in rock and pop music. The best example is Stairway to Heaven. What is the second chord right here? Do you recognize that color, right? It's exactly our minor major 7 chord. So if the open 5th is the root, then we have the major 7th, the minor 3rd, the 5th, and the 9th of the chord. So that's the James Bond chord, right? So it's used a lot in Stairway to Heaven. If you've seen my video Top 10 Chords from the album Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, once again you can click here if you haven't seen it. In the song Us and Them, we have this little D sus2, and then the third chord, it's exactly this. It's a D minor major 7 chord. So you could use it with a pedal point. A pedal point means that you keep the same bass note for all chords. So in that case, we keep the D at the bottom. It's used a lot in progressive rock, so that was a nice way to use it. And then the Beatles are doing that very often also. For example, the song Something, right? They're gonna start the song in C major, right? So, something in the way she moves. So it's already a chromatic movement inside, right? C major 7, C dominant 7 to have the ba, ba, ba. But it's not a minor major 7 because we are in a major key. But then in the chorus, I don't want to leave her now. I know I believe in how. This part right here. So it's like, it's an A minor. And then it's an A minor major 7 as a passing chord. And then and D after, right? Da-na-na-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na-na-na. So using it as a passing chord is a really classic way, that little dun, 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 that we hear in many songs. There's a reason, because it works so well and it's really beautiful. I'm going to show you 6 ways you can use augmented chords musically on guitar. So if you don't know how to use augmented chords and how to create chord progressions with them, this is going to be the perfect lesson for you. So first of all, what is an augmented chord? It's when you take a regular triad of a root, third, and fifth, and you raise the fifth to a sharp 5. So it does 1, 3, sharp 5, and it's a super tense chord that you can use to resolve in many different ways, right? And as far as the chord shapes, you don't have a lot to learn. You can use this one, this 3-note shape. If you want to make it a bigger chord, you can add your ring finger on the 5th string. Or you could play a smaller shape on the top 3 strings. So either this one, or the bigger one. Because what's fascinating with augmented chords is that it's always going to make the same chord shape wherever you are on the fretboard. So for example, if I take C triads all over the fretboard and I want to create C augmented triads, let's say I pick this one, that comes from the C bar chord from the 5th string. This one. The 5th of the chord is the bottom note right here. So if I want to raise it 1 fret higher, it makes the same shape I showed you 30 seconds before. If I take this C triad right here, that comes from the C bar chord from the 6th string. This time the 5th of my chord is the top note. So if I raise it, I get the same shape again. If I take, for example, the C open, the 5th of my chord is the open third. So if I raise it 1 fret, it's exactly the same shape again. And if I leave the C, it's like the bigger shape. So either here, or here, or here, it's exactly the same shape everywhere, so that's why you always end up getting the same shape. And as far as how to write the chord, you're going to see either a C sharp 5, or most of the times it's just going to be a plus sign. So if you see a C plus, it means to play a C augmented chord. So now let's go to my 6 tips to use it musically on guitar. Number 1, to use it as the 3rd chord in harmonic minor. So if you play on a harmonic minor scale, it is made, so if I play it in C minor, for example, it's going to be made of the 1, 2, minor 3, 4, 5, minor 6, natural 7, 1. It's like an exotic feeling, right? So if we want to build triads off of the harmonic minor scale, we get 1, minor 3, 5, or 1, flat 3, 5, which makes a C minor chord. If we keep going, we get 2, 4, flat 6, which creates a D diminished. And if we keep going, we have flat 3, 5, 7, natural 7. So we get an augmented triad, right? In our case, it's going to be an E flat augmented. So if I want to improvise with my C harmonic minor scale, I could create a chord progression like this, like C minor, and then E flat augmented, C minor, E flat augmented. And then I can improvise with my C harmonic minor. So if I try to do that with my little loop, Right, so it's super cool if you want to create a totally different kind of mood using the harmonic minor scale. It's just to use, in my case, I use the root chord, C minor, and then the 3 chord in harmonic minor, which is exactly the E flat augmented on the flat 3, right? So that's one way to do it. The second way is just to substitute a dominant 7 chord with an augmented chord. So usually the dominant 7 chord is going to be the 5 chord of your key that wants to resolve to the root chord. So if I am in the key of G major, for example, then the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be on D, and I'm going to play a D dominant 7. That's going to want to resolve to G. Da, da. But you can replace that dominant 7 chord by an augmented chord if you want. So that's a D augmented that wants to resolve just as well to the G after. It's just a different kind of tension that wants to resolve exactly to the same place. In the case of our dominant 7, we have a contrary motion of resolution that we want. One note wants to resolve upwards, and one note wants to resolve downwards. But in the case of our augmented triad, both notes wants to resolve upwards. Compared to so it's just a different flavor of resolution for your 5 chord, whether it's or. So it always works to substitute a dominant 7 chord for an augmented chord, and you can play one after another if you want to add an extra spice here. So you can play. Right, it just makes you stay longer on the 5 chord. Which is super cool. Number 3 way is to have a chromatic descending cliche line, right? It's when you play a minor triad. So for example, if I am on B minor, it's when you play the root note and you just descend chromatic like this. So for example, you've all heard that or hear like. So if we analyze the notes, we got a B minor triad. But when we bring the root note to the 7th, it actually creates our augmented shape right here. So the notes right here are A sharp, D, and F sharp. So if I reconstruct the chord, it makes an F sharp augmented. And then it goes to a D triad, and then to an E dominant 9. Super colorful. So in fact, that chord progression ends up being B minor, then F sharp augmented, D, and E dominant 9. So it's cliche, but it sounds so good to use chromaticism, so you can use the augmented chord in this way, in that chord progression right here. The number 4 way is actually kind of the opposite motion. It's to use the augmented chord to link your relative major and minor chords. So if you don't know what the relative major minor chords are, for example, if we stay in the key of G major that we used previously in the lesson, in any major key, the 6th chord of your harmonization is your relative minor chord. So in my key right here, I have the 1 chord, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chord. So E minor, my 6th chord in my G major key, is my relative minor chord. It means that the key of G major and the key of E minor are like twin keys. They share exactly the same notes, exactly the same chords. It's just the tonal center that's different, right? So you can use an augmented chord in between your major chord and its relative minor, and that's gonna resolve super well. So for example, if I use my G, and then I transform it into a G augmented, and then I resolve on E minor, which is my relative minor chord. And it works well because you keep exactly the same thing at the bottom. It's just the top note that moves, right? Because that note right here wants to resolve upwards to that note, and when we resolve here, it creates an E minor triad, right? Right? So it's a great progression to use that. So you could have a progression of like G augmented after that, and then E minor, and then C, for example. So that would do. Right. I think it's something that the Beatles have done. Like, it sounded a little bit like the Beatles, what I played. So it's a really cool chord to use to link the relative major and minor chord. The fifth way is just to use it as a vamp, right? Because when you use the augmented chord, it wants to resolve upwards, but it can resolve downwards also to its previous chord. I think it's because the sharp 5 can also be a flat 6, like it's an enharmonic. It means it could be a sharp 4, a sharp 5 as much as it could be a flat 6, right? So if it's a sharp 5, it wants to resolve upwards. But if we consider that it's a flat 6, then it could resolve downwards, right? So you could use your root chord and then play an augmented and then resolve to the same root chord after and play it as a vamp. Maybe it's not the best example, but the song Baby Hold On by Eddie Money. So if you haven't lived through the late 70s, maybe you don't know this. I'm too young for that, but my parents know this very well. So the song Baby Hold On, that goes like this. Like, it's exactly this. It's in the key like of D. It's just a regular D open chord. And then we play it as an augmented chord. And we just resolve it to the root chord. And it works super well. It's just a proof that you can resolve to the previous chord as much as you can resolve to another chord afterwards, right? And the number 6 way to use the augmented chord musically is to take advantage of its symmetrical shape. So like I said, that shape right here is the same everywhere. So you could use the same shape and just go 4 frets up, and it's gonna create the same chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So for example, if I take it from the second fret, for example. So what are the notes here? We have F, A, and C sharp. If I go 4 frets up, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have the notes A, C sharp, and F. Exactly the same notes, just in a different order. It's an inversion. 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the notes? C sharp, F, and A. So it's just always the same chord if you go 4 frets up or 4 frets down. So you can use it to bridge the gap on the fretboard, or like create more tension and momentum before you resolve your chord. So if I do the same example where I go from G to G augmented, and then I resolve to E minor, and then to C, I can take advantage of that. So I could do like something like that. So G, G augmented, and I go 4 frets, 4 frets, 4 frets, and I resolve to E minor. So that's another way to do it, and it's actually something that you can also do with diminished chords to bridge the gap between frets on the fretboard. So if you want to see my full lesson on diminished chord, you can click on the upper card also. Thank you so much for watching once again. If you like juicy chord voicings, go get my chord dictionary guide. First link in the description box below. I added add 9, add 11, super clusters, many kind of chord progressions, and so many different styles that you can try, and so much more. So you can download it if you have not done it already. First link below. Thank you so much, and I'm gonna see you real soon in a new video. Until next time, au revoir.